What's up, lore masters? This is a continuing breakdown of themes in the TNG episode, The Drumhead. This video is going to jump already 16 minutes into the episode, so for the best effect and to understand what's going on, you should probably start from the beginning. You can check it out in the top right hand corner. With that out of the way, let's just get into it. The last time we touched on this episode, we discussed the preliminary interviews with Beverly and Tarsus. It was interesting to contrast the ease and comfortable nature of Dr. Crusher versus how scared and worked up Tarsus was. I've already touched on this, but at the end of Tarsus's interview, the empath states clearly that Tarsus is scared and hiding something. Something so big it's overwhelming him. Both the empath and Sati are happy to stop the interviews here and not talk to anyone else, believing they have found the additional spy. I've said it before and I'll say it now. This is incredibly stupid. First, it's going to be discussed, but just because he is hiding something doesn't actually mean that he's done anything wrong. More importantly, just because they think they have their man doesn't mean they should stop. If there is another spy out there, this would give them more time to get away or prepare for the interview. So whether you think investigating Tarsus is appropriate or not, it's moronic to stop here. But stupid or not, they would begin to solely focus on Tarsus himself. After it's clear that Sati has laser focused on Tarsus, Picard directly confronts her. Based on the dialogue, we get the impression that Sati thinks Tarsus should be confined to his quarters and closely monitored. What strikes me in this conversation is how Picard is shown to be an absolute hypocrite. It's subtle, but you do actually see it. Sati will even call him out on it. In the end, Sati is ultimately an outsider from the Enterprise's crew, the Enterprise family. Picard doesn't like using the quote-unquote intuition of Sati's empath, but when the former admiral asks if he would be alright with the decision if it had been made by Deanna Troi, he admits that he would. So really, Picard isn't against holding an innocent man if his in-group and close circle think that it should be done. His morals only begin to come out if an outsider wants to do it to one of his people. Now, to be absolutely fair here, Picard realizes his blinders, his duality, and states that he will question that practice in the future, only to ultimately do exactly this in other episodes. Well, at least he thought about it. Can't win them all, I guess. Back to the conversation proper, they do discuss whether it is right to hold Tarsus for something that is little better than an educated guess. Picard rightly states that the man hasn't done anything, that he was scared when he was put on this mock trial, which is something that could reasonably happen to most people. And that while he is hiding something true, there's nothing that ties him to any sabotage. Sati's position is that there's definitely something odd going on with Tarsus, and it's very dangerous to let someone who may be a threat roam free, especially if we consider that Tarsus now knows he is about to be caught if he is truly guilty. Tarsus is being backed into a corner, so what would a spy who's in this position do? Would he try to escape? What if he feels he can't? How far would he be willing to go to keep his secrets? Would he destroy the Enterprise to ensure that the Romulan Star Empire isn't found out? Honestly, the more I watch this episode and do research into military law, I come to the conclusion that both Sati and Picard are right, and both of them are wrong. Starfleet is finally beginning to realize that it's a military again. Tarsus is a member of Starfleet. Members in the military are held to a different standard, and it is possible that they willingly forego some of their rights in service to their government, queen and country, and all that. Additionally, if Tarsus is a threat, then keeping an eye on him isn't unreasonable. But military or not, he still has rights, both under the Federation Charter and Constitution, as well as whatever uniform code of military justice Starfleet would employ. It's clear, at least to me, that Tarsus is meant to be treated more civilian than military member in the episode. This all just based on the dialogue and the writing. Now, I think that this is a misstep in the plot if there was a goal to show Sati as being completely unreasonable. Instead of having Tarsus be in the military, be in Starfleet, have him be a part of a delegation that was aboard the Enterprise. Have that delegation be from a member world, and with the Enterprise crippled, they can't get them to a starbase. So the investigation begins on the Enterprise under Picard's watch. As a civilian, this all would fall more into line with what they were going for. There's no gray. However, that isn't what occurred. Tarsus is in the military. He is in Starfleet. And for my money, I honestly have to say that I'm more on the side of Sati at this point in regards to what she wants to do. Not necessarily the why, though. If there is a chance that Tarsus is a spy, or is about to damage the ship, then let's go ahead and limit his ability to do so. Restrict him to quarters under guard and monitoring. It's not personal, it's business. And while this may not be what Tarsus wants, I would much rather hurt his feelings than have a warp core breach because a spy decided to throw a rock at the most volatile warp core ever created by man. Unfortunately, we don't know what way Picard will go. The discussion is interrupted by LaForge. LaForge and Data explain that ultimately this explosion was an accident. Something that could not have been detected, caused by the hatch itself. I want to take a moment though to question the choice to make the explosion be an accident. Some in the comments section have spoken about this episode being a play on McCarthyism. We can definitely see that as the episode progresses from this point out. But I'm just going to throw this out there, and I'd love to know your thoughts. It's easy to look at Sati and cast judgment, to say that she's doing the wrong thing, just shake our heads because ultimately she's going after an innocent man. But what if the accident had been sabotage? Bonus points. What if Tarsus was a spy that wanted to destroy the Enterprise? You see, Sati is still wrong in that instance, but it's much harder to stand in judgment if the man was guilty. You can't use the wrong methods to get the truth and it still be a just system. Fighting for Tarsus when he is guilty only helps us defend those who are innocent. I think that if they had went that way, it could have been very powerful to have Picard fight for the rights of a guilty man. That's not to say where they went with this episode was bad. I still like the message. It's still good to take a look at McCarthyism in and of itself, but this could have been a very different episode with very different implications. But that wouldn't be the way of things, however. As stated, it is ultimately determined that the explosion was indeed an accident. If you haven't had a chance to watch the Drumhead, which first, why the hell are you watching this if you haven't? But beyond that, please watch the conversation that occurs after the 21-minute timestamp on Netflix if you don't watch anything else. That entire dialogue perfectly shows our civilization today. If there is a disease in our Western culture, it would have to be the need to attack that which we don't know, fear, or hate, with a disregard to the truth. I've stated it before, but ultimately Sati and Worf are looking to prove a person innocent, not determine if he is guilty. These are two very different concepts. And honestly, it's something that I think we see now all the time, from politics to Star Trek. If a person, an idea, or a show is hated so much, people will listen to anyone who sounds confident and can provide the scantest of quote-unquote proof to back up their point. Our culture is largely not skeptical anymore. People don't look into things if they are presented with something that matches their ideals. They just accept what's put before their eyes. And if the information ultimately is proven to be wrong, if the politician they were listening to, the news anchor, or YouTuber is shown to be just grasping at straws, who cares? The object of hate, the person, show, or idea that they were unreasonably persecuting is still evil. Because whoever was being attacked, the person, show, or idea that was unreasonably being persecuted is still evil and is probably guilty of something just as aberrant as what they were being accused of. So we'll just keep pushing that. The sad fact is, McCarthyism has never really left us. It's just changed form. Ultimately, the truth matters. The entirety of this episode is about the presumption of innocence, about witch trials, about damning a person for who they are. And yet today, we do the same thing. And the majority of people who do this and are told what they are doing never admit it to themselves. Just a thought. But getting off my soapbox, we see a conversation occurring between Sati, her empath, Picard, and Worf, as I've noted. I've already alluded to this, but the conversation shows the stark differences in the characters. With no evidence of further sabotage, Picard is happy to let the entire thing go. However, Sati and Worf point out that it doesn't actually end here. What's truly scary here is how Sati interweaves legitimate concern with unreasonable paranoia. She does bring up some good points. It is unlikely that the Klingon spy could have done everything he did without help. But on the other hand, it is very unreasonable to completely unravel all of Tarsus's life because you think that Tarsus did it. Is it unreasonable to continue the investigation though? Not necessarily. But it is unreasonable to assume he's guilty and try to prove his innocence. The real meat of this episode, and indeed the breakdown, will be the trial of Tarsus. So I'm going to stop here so that I can have an entire video dedicated to that. Throughout this series, people have thanked me for talking about the ills of the culture but not taking sides. Some have worried that I'm going to get overly political, and some have even accused me of supporting one person over the other. This isn't a political channel, and that's not my intent. But I do believe this episode speaks to us as a people, as a culture. For me, the problem is rarely what a person believes, but how they believe it. Most people are generally moderate and have a good head on their shoulders. but they allow themselves to be pulled into this cult mentality. People don't allow themselves to keep their minds open, and worse, they begin to hate the person for what that person believes. For me, I'd much rather have someone who is wrong on the topic but has an open mind than someone who is right and be an unchanging sycophant. One can be reasonable, the other will believe anything that justifies their assumption. One of the reasons I love doing what I do is because I can explore these themes. Star Trek has the ability to make us question ourselves, and that's one of the reasons I think it's so important to break down the lore. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate and subscribe, and as always, guys, remember that in the end, all of our lives are just a story. Make yours a good one.